Welcome back to the Breakdown, everybody. Thank you so much for staying with us during that break. We are continuing the Breakdown Paranormal Files right here on Odyssey Radio, ODYSYradio.com. You can listen to us on iHeartRadio, or you can go to odysseyradio.com and download the app and have all kinds of fantastic paranormal, conspiracy, alternative health information and shows there for you at your fingertips. Again, that's Odyssey Radio, ODYSYradio.com. So we're continuing the program tonight, and one of the things I love about doing this type of show is that if I have questions, if I have anything my little conspiratory mind can think about, if I want to find out about conspiracy theories or paranormal things or odd or macabre or horror, something like that, I can always reach out to somebody and talk to them and ask them the questions that pop up, or just have them come on the show and educate me and in turn educate you, which I think is fantastic. And last week we had David Weiss on the program. You can go and listen to him by going to odysseyradio.com and clicking on the Paranormal Files show link, and you'll be able to listen to that full show. You'll also be able to watch it if you want, because David gives a great visual presentation of Flat Earth, and it is available on YouTube as well. Just search for The Breakdown with Aaron Barker. So I'm continuing in that vein because I still have unanswered questions, and I'm still wondering, and I'm still looking at this world, trying to piece things together. As a Christian, looking for that big biblical cosmology and trying to figure out things of this great, wonderful world that surrounds us. So I reached out to Mark Sargent. He was very gracious to come on last minute, like literally last minute, to come on the program with me. And who's Mark Sargent? Well, let me give you a brief bio, and then I'll let him introduce himself as well when he comes on. But he asks the question, are we living in a Truman Show enclosed world thousands of miles wide? This is part of a series of videos that shows not only is it possible, but likely. Mark Sargent, growing up on the South Whidbey Island in Washington, started his career playing computer games professionally in Boulder, Colorado. From there, he spent the next 20 years training people in proprietary software. In 2014, he looked into what is no doubt the strangest conspiracy theory ever, called Flat Earth Theory, and through extensive research discovered that it wasn't so laughable after all. In 2015, he released a series of YouTube videos titled Flat Earth Clues, which delves into the possibility of our human civilization actually being inside a Truman Show-like enclosed system, and how it's been hidden from the public since 1956. Now, you can find Mark's content over on YouTube, his books on Amazon, and the Netflix documentary Behind the Curve. So without further ado, Mark Sargent, thank you so much for joining us on the program tonight, sir.
Hey, very much for having me.
Absolutely. So give us a little introduction to you as well. I know I read that bio there, but it's always good to hear from folks, especially what brought you to this conclusion, and where did you come from, and what brought you to this conclusion that the Earth is indeed flat and that we're in this Truman Show style enclosed world?
Mostly conspiracy boredom, believe it or not. I never got married or had kids, and I'm older, so I had a chance to go down a whole bunch of rabbit holes when the internet was new, when you could actually finish the internet back in the day. And I was looking, I don't know if you ever saw the documentary Behind the Curve on Netflix, but it's pretty much, that story is true. That part of the documentary is true, which is I looked into just about every conspiracy you can think of. You can think of it. I've got an opinion on it. Some I like, some I don't. You want to tell me that, Elvis, is still alive and Bigfoot is running around? I'd be like, they're not my favorites. You want to tell me what the core of the Earth looks like? That's a whole different story. And so the Flat Earth was just on my bucket list of things to look at. It's like, I'll knock this thing out in a weekend. And that weekend turned into a month, which turned into 3 months, which turned into 9 months, off and on, until finally in 2015, I decided to make a series of videos and put them out on the internet and said, okay, I can't prove the globe in a court of law anymore. Like everybody that gets into Flat Earth is, we start out trying to debunk it. That's the t-shirt. I got into Flat Earth because I tried to disprove it. And the series of videos that I made, I put out there with all my contact information, my real address, my phone number, my real name, everything. Didn't use any aliases. And I was waiting for some academic to call me up and say, this is where you went wrong. You forgot to carry the two. You can shut down all your social media stuff and be done with it. But that's not what happened. A whole bunch of subject matter experts contacted me, and media contacted me, and a few trolls contacted me, but very, very few compared to the positives. And so by the time 2015 ended, I was absolutely on board with it. And it just kept snowballing from there, and a lot more people got involved. And next thing you know, we were doing conferences, and I was going overseas and talking to people about it. And here we are, almost. In fact, the clues turn 8 years old in less than 2 weeks.
Wow.
Like 9 days.
So when you initially posted those, were you
Yeah.
convinced? Were you like, hey, we're in a flat earth. This is exactly what it's like. Or were you still like, these are questions and I'm just pondering. I'm just throwing it out there as I'm working through it.
I was mostly, because again, it took me 9 months. I'm a fairly clever problem solver. I'm not a fast problem solver, but I'm pretty creative. I'll find the workarounds. I'll find a way to get to the solution. Maybe not the most orthodox way, but I'll find a way. So by 9 months in, when I made the videos, I was pretty sure, to the point where, if you remember, if you've ever been in university or heard about people taking blue book tests. And when you take a blue book test in a university, you put all your, you finish whenever you finish, and you turn it in. And when you turn it in, you're either pretty confident or you're really confident. And when I turned this thing in, I was pretty close, but I wasn't positive. I was waiting for the other shoe to drop, and it never did. The academics never called me.
So you were kind of
Nobody
waiting for
ever
somebody
called me
to
up
knock
and
on your
shot it
door
down.
and say, you were kind of waiting on somebody to knock on your door and say, hey, this is where you're wrong. This is where you need to correct this and fix this, etc.
Yeah.
So what has been the most convincing part of this entire thing for you, where you just look at it and you're like, if everything else were to be disproven, this one thing, I'm just like, for the rest of my existence, I can't get over this one thing?
I'll tell you two, because what convinced me, or my favorite one right now, the one I hold on to like grim death, is not the one that most people do. What gets most people into the community is long distance photography, because everybody misses it. And the only reason we even figured it out was because HD technology came along.
Right.
If you would go back 30 years, you can have the best camera on the shelf, and you shoot, you start looking at a boat off in the distance, it's just this smudgy thing. Now you can get a $400 camera off the rack and zoom in on stuff that's way farther than it should be. That's what gets most people, but that's not mine. Mine is a little harder to explain because it's invisible, but I'll explain it anyway. And I know that David Weiss probably talked about this a little bit, which is gravity versus the vacuum of space. And what I try to tell people is, let's say, for example, the second floor of where you live right now, you turned into a little vacuum chamber, right? Like 20 feet by 30 feet or whatever, right? And you put a valve above your head and a lever, and you pull that lever. What happens? It's not like the movies. It is instant. It is violent. The air will absolutely equalize in a fraction of a second. Any deep sea diver will tell you this. Anybody that works on oil rigs, any submarine people, they will all tell you this. It is extremely violent. Pressure next to non-pressure, even though you can't see it. Like right now, what we're breathing in right now is not nothing. It's 80% nitrogen and 20% oxygen, right? So what happens when you pull that valve above your head? It just fires up instantly. And in fact, you'll probably black out. You might even die, right? So when you go outside, why is our atmosphere still here? You know what I mean? Meaning our atmosphere sits right next to the vacuum of space, the purest vacuum of space. I've talked to vacuum chamber experts. And when you have a pure vacuum, it's like orders of magnitude even stronger. So your first and only knee-jerk response to that will be gravity. Gravity. Oh, gravity is obviously holding the air down. I go, you mean the same gravity that couldn't keep the air in your living room from rushing upstairs? That gravity? The exact same gravity? Mm-hmm. And then people kind of get stuck because they know, science says, well, it has to be gravity, otherwise we'd be dead. And I go, that's not how the logic works. What is the barrier? And they say gravity. And I go, gravity is not a barrier. Tell me what happens when you get to the bleeding edge of space, where our atmosphere ends and space begins. Tell me what happens. No science can tell me. They just stuck. And they just said, well, it's got to be gravity. And that's the end of the discussion. It's like, and it's because it's the only option for them. I go, other than being a pressurized system, that we're living inside a dome. We're living inside a snow globe that's holding the air in. I mean, there's a reason why they call it air pressure. Oh, and while we're at it, there's a reason why they call it greenhouse gases. Doesn't it make more sense if it's an actual physical greenhouse? I never understood that even before I was into flat Earth. Like when fluorocarbons, when we were talking about the ozone layer, we're banning
Yeah.
styrofoam things at McDonald's, and we're banning underarm aerosol deodorants because
Cans
like,
of
oh no, the
hairspray.
fluorocarbons get up to the atmosphere, they just stay there.
Yeah.
And as I'm getting older, I'm going, how do they stay there? So anyway, that's my big cling to. But most people, it takes them a while because again, a vacuum is invisible. You could be sitting in a vacuum chamber right now and visibly, because of our spectrum, what we can see and what we can't see, no one would know.
So that's a very convincing argument. That's very interesting because you would think if gravity is, and I'm not a scientist, I'm a science nerd wannabe.
Sure.
But it seems like so the gravity would have to be more powerful than the vacuum that exists within space to suck in or hold in this system, so that so that space didn't just rip us apart, right?
Right. And there's no examples of that. I mean, and you can defy gravity all day long. When you're like, take a straw into a drink, right? Whatever it is, iced tea, soda, it doesn't matter. Like, you are going against gravity. You are creating a small vacuum force and to drink that liquid, right? It's easy. A vacuum force will beat gravity every day of the week. But that's not what we see when we watch television and movies. It's always the same thing, right? There's a hole in the side of the spaceship, right? It's like, oh Lord, we're decompressing. We only got 2 minutes of air left, right? Get the duct tape, and it's this race against the clock. It's like, no, it's instant. I mean, it's a fraction of a second. And if you ever see that in a space movie, which is why I know it kind of dates me, the James Cameron movie Aliens from years ago, right? The end where Ripley opens up that door to space. Right? Everything's getting sucked out. She's fighting, climbing the ladder. Like, no. She's dead. The little girl's dead. The alien's dead. The Marines are dead. Everybody's dead. Movie's over. Roll the credits. So
wow. So now those are pretty. Those can get kind of heady, right? Right. And I know that one of the things that you do well is you're kind of looked at as the freshman recruiter. So to speak, of those. So if you're at Flat Earth University, you're the freshman recruiter that people come to see when they're on the fence about coming to the college. So let me ask you this. So I'm a nobody. I have no interest at all or have no idea about Flat Earth University. I come on campus for the visit. I run into you as the freshman recruiter. What's your pitch for me to be a part of and come to Flat Earth University?
My nickel tour is the intro that I put on my channel. It's the intro for the documentary, which is science will tell you that you are the leftover remnants of the Big Bang.
Yeah.
Right. That you are living on a tiny little rock covered in a little bit of water and a little bit of gas, flying through an impossibly huge universe, and your life means nothing. You are insignificant. Which I don't think many people actually believe that, because if they did, they'd treat every day like it was their last. The truth is that you are living in a building built by God. And it is, for lack of a better term, a snow globe. But if a sports stadium, a shallow sports stadium works for you, I mean, I've had some people say, it's like a pizza box. You're living in a structure with walls and a floor and a ceiling. And inside that structure is a giant saltwater lake. And in the middle of that saltwater lake are a bunch of islands that we call continents. And you live on one of them. And space, for lack of a better word, is an illusion. It is all space is just lights on a ceiling. It is a giant, heavily ornamented clock system which predates language. In fact, it doesn't need language at all. And it's been used for thousands of years for all sorts of things. In fact, there doesn't even have to be space. Whether it is there for signs and wonders, and it's there to inspire you. And this place was built for you. And if you are interested in this, that's why you should look into Flat Earth and look at all this stuff. The first part is you have to look at what space is not, and what the powers that be have gone, the lengths they have gone to keep this from you, which really has only been going on for the last 60 years, give or take. I mean, with the exception of the globe, which is a whole other thing, but they've really amped it up over the last 60 years. And then you have to look at what is possible, which shouldn't be possible. Meaning like long distance photography and vacuum versus the gravity of space, or the eclipse shadow, or the Van Allen radiation belts, or all sorts of fun stuff.
Right. That compelling argument that you gave there within the Big Bang, and I've heard this before. I mean, it is not something that is uncommon. That we're all just collective stardust, remnants of a massive explosion that happened billions of years ago, and we exist on this planet that by chance found the Goldilocks zone next to the sun and all these planets, and we hit right dead center into there. Now, I do know that because there are a lot of creationists and a lot of Christians who say, well, there was no chance. God directed the Big Bang. He put the planet where it was. He created it in 6 days and all of that stuff. How does this flat Earth differ in regards to the Christian who says yes, the world was created, it is round, and your standpoint that says no, it was not, it's immovable and it exists on this plane?
The difference is first off, in the flat Earth community, and I don't know if David Weiss told you this or not, is that at least half the community are hardcore Christians. At least
I've seen that a lot. Yeah, a lot of people have that biblical understanding of that.
Yeah, and there have been flat Earth conferences, flat Earth Christian conferences, which I wasn't even invited to because I couldn't quote enough chapter and verse. If you can believe it.
Oh wow!
So but one of the best guys that we had, who's the late Rob Skiba, he has a wonderful website out there called testingtheglobe.com, and he called me up after he got into this. I converted him back in 2015, and he came back to me, and was a big biblical prophecy guy, and he goes, Mark, the Bible's a flat Earth book. He goes, there are so many references that talk about everything being stationary, being immovable, being basically God's footstool. He goes, there's only one verse that even hints at it, which is Isaiah 40:22, which is he who sitteth upon the circle of the earth, right? And as you know, well, I mean, he quoted the ancient Hebrew, which is circle is not globe, it is not ball, it is not sphere. Circle is circle, no different than a dinner plate or your dining room table or a hubcap or something like that. That's the only verse that hints at any sort of circular or spherical thing. He goes, but it does not have veto power over everything else. Certainly not Genesis. Was it Genesis 1:8 when the firmament that was placed between the waters above and the waters below? Or I don't know if David mentioned this because I was the one that showed him, which was Wernher von Braun, the founder of NASA, his headstone. It was brilliant, which is, it's not this guy pointing at the sky with a big cement rocket behind him. It's just the year he was born, the year he died, and then Psalms 19:1. I didn't know what it was. I had to look it up. And it says, and the firmament shows his handiwork. Why would the founder of NASA, an ex-Nazi scientist, be reaching out from the grave and telling us about a structure that supposedly doesn't exist?
Very intriguing. Yeah, I have seen that a lot. There's a lot of Christians in this. There, and are you a Christian as well?
Oh yeah.
Okay, I didn't know that as part of this. I'm very happy to hear that. Yeah, there seem to be a lot of Christians, and when you read those scriptures and put those texts together, it talks about the immovable earth. It talks about how the foundation. It talks about earthquakes. It shakes the earth, but violently, etc. But it doesn't. But it does point to something being created. Now, a lot of folks will say that that's archaic language. That's their understanding back then. But God has an eternal understanding of all of this. And if he inspired the word of God, then the idea that he would put something in there that would just kind of fade away as science began to make their discoveries seems to me a little bit far-fetched.
I see it. It's sort of like the hero's journey, right? This was never going to be easy. And God never said it was going to be easy. Right. It's always been about the challenge, about the tests that have been put in front of us. I like bending a little of some of the quotes, which is well, not a biblical quote, obviously, but the what was the saying? The greatest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing the world he didn't exist. Right. Mine goes into lines of, it's not the devil didn't convince everyone that he didn't exist. He convinced the world that it didn't exist, the true world, meaning when the globe was put into play, which was basically just an interpretation of the sky, that's all it was. You were basically hiding God from everybody, and that's when the rise of science into what I call its own religion, which is scientism. And science
Yeah.
has been beating everybody over the head with textbooks for the last, half a century?
Yeah.
And they just keep going with it, and they do not want, the separation between church and state, the state being, the science part of thing, has been almost absolute. When we're battling people, especially in this arena, it's always against religion. The Rob Skiba, who I mentioned, I remember being at a meetup with him down in Los Angeles, and some of the networks wanted to talk to somebody, and he was being mobbed. He was way more popular than I was. Right. And I go, that's the guy you want to talk to. It's like, no, sorry. He's too churchy. We don't want to bring it into religion into this. Wow. And mainstream media has been following that for the longest time. They will not tie this to religion in any way, shape, or form.
It's almost as if they I don't want to say, almost as if, quotey fingers, they do that on purpose to make it look like, well, that's just a religious zealot buying into a book that's thousands of years old. You're listening to The Breakdown, Paranormal Files, right here on Odyssey Radio. We're talking to Mark Sargent about what led him to Flat Earth, and then also what would convince other people about the Flat Earth. So do you use a combination when you talk to people of Scripture and and science, or at least the facts and evidence that you've been able to generate through your own or others' experiments? Is that kind of like your thing?
Yeah, it depends on the audience, obviously, read the room. So when it comes to talking to people about it, I have to kind of feel them out first and see where they are. If they immediately come at me and say, well, how does the Bible fit into this? Then yeah, I'll go chapter and verse for as long as I can. One of my favorites I bring up there would be the story of Joshua. Where Joshua, asked God to hold the sun and the moon in the sky for an extra day so he can slay more enemies. Well, doesn't that make a lot more sense in an enclosed system than it does a massive universe? Instead of pausing the solar system, all you have to do is hit pause on the sky. That's it.
Yeah,
it's easy.
And what I find fascinating about the account of Joshua having the sun stand still, or asking for it to stand still, is so many people will say, well, that is that's just poetic language. That's just how we see things and how it's interpreted. But it does seem, as if I mentioned, as we did previously, that God would put that in the Scriptures for us to see and realize, without obviously, spelling it out completely, that the earth is the one that's stationary and the sun is the one that's moving.
Yeah. In fact, I'll direct people to the stuff, everything that we talk about in our community, nothing's secret. So I'll say, oh, hey, just Google the term ancient cosmology, right? And then hit images. You will see every single culture going back, to recorded history. They all drew the same thing. They all basically drew a snow globe, including the Greeks at one point. He was like, no, the Greeks know. No. The Greeks were talking about that stuff before they even, we even knew where the continents were, or at least perceived they were. But anyway, everyone drew the same thing. Only 500 years ago did they all of a sudden, with Copernicus, introduce this model, this globe model. Again, when most people, 500 years ago, most people couldn't even read and write. But you put that model in there, and it's amazing reinforcement. Don't forget, we put this in the classroom of kindergarten. When you're 6 years old, and it sits in the corner. It's the only conspiracy, by the way, we debunk to children. Meaning, one of the first things the teacher says, oh yeah, by the way, we used to think the world is flat. Now here's what we know it is, and they show you the toy, and then they put it in the classroom. They don't have to say anything else. It stays in your classroom for until you graduate from high school. That's amazing conditioning. Sorry, go ahead.
No, please continue.
Well, imagine this, right above it, usually, because they usually put it below the flag. Think about it. The flag's in the corner of your classroom for 12 years. There are a number of people that partially joined the military.
Right. Well, we're going to take a quick break. When we get back, we're going to continue talking to Mark Sargent right here on The Breakdown, Paranormal Files on Odyssey Radio. Keep it locked in.
Asking the questions that get you kicked out of Bible studies and sent to therapy.
You're listening to The Breakdown.
At Romika Designs, we're more than just a laser engraving and specialty design company. Much more. I'm Ron Phillips, co-owner of Romika Designs, and if you can dream it, we can probably make it. We can custom laser cut and engrave on nearly all material. Great for one-of-a-kind gifts, home decor, business and specialty items, or personalized and logoed designs created just for you or your company. Allow us to become your go-to gift and specialty project partner. Romika Designs can help make your ideas a reality. We're ready to help you design and create that special gift for any occasion or engrave your personal or business logo on just about any product. View our designs at romikadesigns.com or simply email us with your ideas. We specialize in custom design and would be honored to have the opportunity to discuss it with you. Call us at 817-400-4040, email info@romikadesigns.com, or visit us on the web at romikadesigns.com.
Let's face it, trying to build your own website can be a frustrating task, but you can't have a company, church, nonprofit, or business without a web presence. That's where SiteFX comes in. SiteFX provides complete website creation from a simple blog style to template-based sites. SiteFX can even give you absolute customization services, bringing your vision to digital life. Even if you already have a website, there's always room for growth. SiteFX has 15 years of experience staying in tune with the current web trends, add-ons, designs, and coding updates. SiteFX even offers comprehensive social media management to assist with your difficult schedule. Don't spend another valuable minute worrying about your web presence. Let SiteFX help you take your business to the next level. Visit them on the web at sitefx.org. That's SITEFX.org. Or call 859-905-0016. That's 859-905-0016. 859-905-0016. SiteFX, your life with an electronic edge. Welcome back to the Breakdown Paranormal Files on Odyssey Radio. Talking to Mark Sargent. Right before we went to break, Mark, you were mentioning that this is the one conspiracy theory where people are taught this from a child, the one conspiracy theory that we're not supposed to debunk. And then you mentioned that the globe is in the school right underneath the flag. What's the connection that you were trying to make there?
Oh, yeah. The connection is when you see any object or any symbol for 12 years, you are going to be connected to it in some way, shape, or form. So, for example, the flag sitting in the corner of the classroom, that partially inspires some people, depending on where you live, to join the military. Oh, yeah, the flag. That's my country. That's where I live. I'm willing to fight for it. Oh, what's below that? Oh, hey, it's the globe. That's where I live. I'm willing to defend that in some way, shape, or form, even at a subconscious level. And that's what they do. The creator of 1984, George Orwell, had this wonderful quote back in, I believe it was 1946, if I'm not mistaken. I should probably look that up real fast. I think it was 1946. One second. Yeah, December 1946. Let me read it really quick. He said, most people, if asked to prove that the earth is round, would not even bother to produce the rather weak arguments I have outlined above. They would start off by saying that everybody knows the earth to be round, and if pressed further, would become angry. He goes, this is a credulous age, and the burden of knowledge which we now have to carry is partially responsible. What I thought was interesting is that if he walked out on the sidewalk and asked in 1946, what shape the world was, they'd say it was a globe, right? Well, how did they know it was a globe in 1946? NASA wasn't even founded until 1958.
Right.
How did you know? And then all of a sudden you realize, which is why you mentioned people get angry. It's not that you know back in 1946 that the world is a globe. You were told, and your father and their father before them, going back how many generations? You started preaching the globe as an absolute fact after NASA was created and then the Apollo program. But even then, we didn't showcase it as much as we should have. We didn't even take the first blue marble shot of the Earth until Apollo 17, the very last Apollo mission from the moon. And then we took it on the way back. It's like, oh, yeah, by the way, here's the blue marble shot of the Earth. You can look this up, not secret information. You know when the second blue marble shot was taken? First one was taken in 1970. You know when the second one was taken? 2015. 43 years. Nobody else took a blue marble shot of the Earth in 43 years. That's forever in the space world. Absolutely forever. And, we know for an absolute fact. I've got the link to it. Obama was the one that did the press release on it. Second blue marble shot of the world. What?
Why did it take so long?
And, 2015. And by the way, why is that significant? That's when we started coming out and saying, oh, yeah, you probably should revisit it because there is a blue marble shot of the world since 1972. And all of a sudden, oh, hey, here's one. That's awfully convenient.
Yeah, awfully convenient there. So Now, you mentioned earlier, obviously the vacuum in space, but then you also mentioned the Van Allen radiation belt.
Belt.
Yeah, what does that have? Because I know that is. You explain to people what that is, and then why that plays into this.
Oh, that's a big one. It's a trap question because it cannot be beat. It's kind of like the whole crane kick from the Karate Kid, which is the Van Allen radiation belt was announced in 1959 by Van Allen, Professor Van Allen, who worked for NASA, by the way. And he says, oh, yeah, it's super deadly, really, really thick bands of radiation around the Earth. No one should ever go up there. Really, really bad. And then Kennedy screwed that whole thing up in 1960, by saying, we choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other thing. And that it's like, and so everyone immediately the media ran back to Van Allen and says, oh, dude, so apparently you're going to be going through the belt. How are you going to get through it? And he goes, well, we're going to go really, really fast. Oh. And that was his answer. And it's like, what are you talking about? Your best speed is like 18,000 miles an hour. And you say these things are 60,000 miles an hour, 6,000 miles thick. And plus you're making a round trip to the moon and back. And plus, meaning you have to brake, you have to slow down as you come through these things. Not to mention, you don't have no shielding for this. Remember, there's only three things that can shield you from radiation. Lead, gold, which is twice as dense as lead, and a whole bunch of water, which they use in power plants. Well, that's the last thing you'd ever want to put any type of aircraft or spacecraft. That's like putting an anchor on top of a rocket. You'd never ever do it. And yet, the Americans went round trip 6 times, moon and back. Nobody died. Nobody got radiation poisoning. Nobody even got cancer. I think there's still 4 of them limping along. We'll see how longer Buzz has. 4 of these guys still around today. How'd they get through it? With plastic and aluminum as shielding. Nobody wants to talk about it.
So that is how we got to the moon. So obviously, if there's a firmament, we can't get through that firmament, and there is no Van Allen belt. There's no trip to the moon. So obviously,
there is no trip. No, the Apollo missions, which is one of my intro questions, which I ask most people. That's how I kind of gauge the room. If you go to somebody and say, "Hey, did the Americans go to the moon?" And they all of a sudden pull out a tiny little American flag, start waving around, and a little tear, rolls down their face and turns into a bald eagle and flies away, then probably shouldn't talk to them about it. But if they're skeptical at all, then definitely, talk to them. What I thought was interesting was when I went to other countries, we'll just pick Sweden, for example, when I was over there. And I said, yeah, I get why the Americans believe that we went to the moon. Rah, rah, go team, we're the best, right? Why do you people in Europe believe that the Americans went to the moon? You know what? They always say the exact same thing. It's like, well, it was on television. It was on your news. The Americans would never lie about that. It's like, it's
of course,
like,
nobody in our government,
even
nobody
the Americans know better.
Yeah. So of course the Van Allen belt, now that is significant because it again tells us that we didn't go to the moon, which I don't believe that we did go to the moon for several reasons, not necessarily because of flat Earth, but because the technology that evidently has disappeared, the technology that they showed us, how would it have gotten through the atmosphere, all the burn up on reentry, the Van Allen belt, how did it blast off from the moon, and all of that. Why wasn't the moon illuminated when the sun was shining on it? All of those things kind of make me think about it. But the biggest thing about that to me is, and I don't want to get off too much on a tangent on that, but the thing that gets to me is that we haven't gone back, and they say we've lost that technology. Right. Well, in our cell phones, we've all heard this before. In our cell phones, we have more computing power than all of the computing power it took to get them to the moon, and that was a full room of computers. You can't tell me that our technology has not advanced to be able to rebuild that or reconstruct it to get back there. And so the other question that I would have, because and again, without getting too much off on a tangent there, because of the moon landing there, the discussion about that is a fascinating discussion. We'll have to have you back on the program about that as well. But just to pull this up here, this is I did an internet search with Mark's previous inquiry for biblical cosmology, and I found, or ancient cosmology, and I found these are different pictures, if you're watching on video, of the different cultures and their cosmology as they saw it. From Buddhism to Christianity to Judaism to Hebrew works, etc. all of these things had the same considerations, or at least the same models that we see present with us now. And it's all an enclosed feature. It's all an enclosed Earth with the sun and moon within the enclosure. And then the planet, or the, for lack of a better word, the land and the water in the middle of that. And then the underworld, which was in the Old Testament and described there as well. But many people have also talked about this theory or this idea as being, David Weiss mentioned this last week on the program, that it was as if we are in a pond. So we have Antarctica, which is the pond, or the walls of the pond. The water exists within that. And it's fascinating to me. And what has always been fascinating to me is how all of these different cultures had some semblance of the same idea. Just like many of the other cultures have the same teaching about a global flood or a judgment flood, something that happened, a deluge that happened to the world at a time when the gods or God judged the world because of their sins. And each of them have that because there is a specific and actual flood that did take place, which explains to us that same kind of cosmology. But back to what we were talking there about the moon landing, without getting off too much on a tangent there, Mark. And as I was saying there, the technology that did exist there no longer, for some reason, exists now, right, which it should. So let's talk about some other things here. People will say, well, you look at the moon's round. You look at the planets are round. So obviously we're round as well.
Right. My argument there, and I've refined this over the years, which is, and I know this dates me, if you go to a planetarium, if you're young enough or old enough to go to a planetarium, and
planetariums
and you know
rock.
what that is, you see, you go in there and it's like, do you see Jupiter? Yes, you do. Does it look spherical? Yeah. Can you land on it? No. Why not? Because it's just lights on a ceiling. It's just this big colorful image on a ceiling that it's spherical. It looks like an illusion. When you walk out of that planetarium, who's to say that you're not in just a much bigger planetarium? So for me, when I walk outside, everything out there is just lights on a ceiling. That's it. Yeah, they look spherical, but that's part of the illusion, right? And again, the illusion was changed. It could have been, before science got involved, it just still would have been lights on a ceiling, right? Because no one with their naked eye can see what Mars really looks like. And even with telescopes, yeah, it looks like a red dot. But then science came in and said, no, it's a solar system. And here's how it works. And here's how the galaxy works around that. And here's how the universe works around that. And the reason why we caught on and did as much, and spread as far as we did, is our explanation of where you live is way easier to understand than the solar system model. And people are always into whatever's easier. It makes more sense. It always has. So
you're saying, well, so what is the moon? I mean, we can look up at it. I mean, we see a texture to it. At least what it appears to us is to have some type of texture to it. What do you think the moon is?
It's just an ornamental light. What's the scripture on that? The sun is just a major light to light up the day, and a lesser light being the moon.
Right.
It's seasons, it's signs and wonders. It's something to inspire you. That's all it is. Is it even 3-dimensional in nature? I don't know. I doubt it. Because we can do so much with 2D. Come on, look what we've done with the HD televisions just in the last 10 years.
Yeah. So is the moon self-illuminated? Because the Bible does talk about.
Absolutely, it's self-illuminated.
Okay, so.
Oh yeah. The moon, the sun, and the moon have nothing to do with each other in terms of reflecting light. In fact, the wonderful one of my 5 bullet points that I throw at people, and you can test this out with in fact, I think I have one of these things lying around here. Point and click. Infrared thermometer. One of these little hobbies for $20. Usually use it to test heat on engines and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Well, somebody called to me like a year and a half when I was into flat Earth, and they said, dude, the moon is cold. And I'm going, all right, I don't know what that means. It's like, and he said, it's generating a cold light. And I'm going, I still don't get it. Is it colder at night? It's like, no, man. He goes, go out with one of these things and test it yourself. And what he was saying was, let's say it's 90 degrees in the sun well, we all know it's like 80 degrees in the shade, right? It's always colder in the shade,
Right.
right? Because it blocks in the radiation. You do the same thing to the moon, it reverses, which it shouldn't. So if it's 50 degrees in the moonlight, it's 60 degrees in the moon shade, depending on how high the moon is in the sky, up to 13 degrees. And we can test this with not only this thing, but like water and copper strips. And on top of that, if you take a magnifying glass and magnify moonlight, it gets colder. It's absolutely bizarre. Now you're thinking, well, what's this got to do with anything? I go, does it prove a flat Earth? No, but it absolutely destroys the relationship between the sun and the moon, because everybody knows the moon is just lit up by the sun. So the moon is reflecting some of the sun's radiation. Well, at the very least, should be neutral, right? Or even just like a couple clicks above neutral. It should never, ever go negative. That's like taking a flashlight and shining against your wall, and the white wall, and the other reflection, you can start, chilling lettuce with it. Now we can do that right now. You can go into Amazon and type in cold laser light, and there are all sorts of health and beauty products which we've created in the last 15 years that kind of harness this sort of thing. It's not an amazing technology to us. The bigger question is, why is the moon doing it? And it's fascinating, and science absolutely does not know what to do with it. Most of them just completely dismiss it. It's like, no, it doesn't. It's not. It doesn't exist. I'm going, are you kidding? This exists all day long. In fact, a couple of years ago, there was a guy with a camera that had predator vision on it, thermal imaging. And he wasn't one of ours. And he just walked around a neighborhood, shooting everything in the neighborhood, lights and, lit areas and shadow areas. He's going, I'll be damned. He goes, it is. He goes, the moon's generating a cold light. So yeah, it's cool. And it's very, very small. The moon is the same size as the sun.
All right. Okay. So that, when you say that, when you throw that out there, so you're saying that the moon is, so the sun is obviously smaller than what we are being told, and the moon is smaller or larger? I mean, how big?
Same size. So that's the whole point of the eclipse, right? It fits. People think it's a coincidence that's like, oh, look, the moon fits right in front of the sun because it's 400 times closer and 400 times narrower simultaneously. And it fits right in front of it, and nobody even questions that. And it's like, oh, by the way, the other part of the moon, which most people don't know, is it's locked to us, meaning we see exactly the same size of the side of the moon, no matter what. It doesn't even change a quarter of a degree in 100 years, ever. It never ever changes. You only see one side of the moon. And
that's something that's always thrown me off as well, because it appears that the moon has different faces, at least, right? So you're telling us
only because it turns. You'll see it spinning, no different than it's turning sideways like this, but you'll never see it rotate. The dark side of the moon is always, the dark side of the moon is kind of funny because it's not always dark. It's just the side we don't see. That's why they call it the dark side.
Yeah, there is no dark side.
The sun and the moon
are. It's all dark.
The sun and the moon are, let's say, give or take, 50 to 70 miles wide, and we're gonna estimate maybe 3,000 miles up.
3,000 miles up.
And one is an incandescent light bulb, which is the sun, and one appears to be a cold LED, which is the moon. And that's how you get away with the time zones, because people say, well, if the sun is above us, if it's right above us in the snow globe, everything would be lit up at once. I go, yeah, unless it's really, really, really small, which is the only drawback to when we draw maps and stuff. The only way we can even make the sun show up on the map is draw it like 1,000 miles wide. And that's when people get that idea. I go, look, we actually drew it 50 miles wide. You'd never see it. It'd just be like a pixel.
Wow.
Yeah.
So the sun and the moon are the same size. The moon does not reflect the sunlight. It generates its own light. And we're not sure what that light is or how it does that. I mean, we don't. We know from the scripture that God created the lesser lights to rule the night. Right. So we know that. We have a few minutes left here. So what are stars? What about stars and planets and all of that? Where are they located in?
Yeah. The stars and the planets. Those are just. Oh boy, I don't want to diminish this because God will be mad at me. So if the moon is a lesser light, then the stars and the planets are even less than that. Meaning they're just background noise. That's it.
Okay. Do you think that they're like the angels that are stuck in the firmament, fallen angels? Do you think that they're Because again, when we look at the scriptures, the sun, the moon, and the stars are given to us, obviously for the light, but then the stars are also given to us so that we can discern the times and the seasons to know when it is, what time it is, etc., for navigation and all of that. I have a hard time thinking that they're fallen angels when the description says that it's created like that.
Yeah, I know. There's some people that talk. I mean, they could be headstones of fallen angels. I don't know. What I think is interesting, though, is the whole out of Revelation, where the stars fall from heaven like figs falling from a tree, right? Always thought that was interesting, even as a kid, because it's like, well, because they supposedly fell to earth in Revelation. It's like, well, that doesn't work, because if they're billions of light years away, then how can they pull that off? But it makes, again, a lot more sense if the lights are just up there, which goes into the Truman Show thing. And that was a little play on biblical thing when one of the spotlights fell to the ground in the Truman Show.
Yeah,
that was brilliant.
So we are running out of time. We just got a few minutes left here. I might hold you over if you don't mind, and maybe do a little bit more. But definitely would love to have you back on in the future, because this is kind of a flat Earth 101. This is me trying to get those questions out, and I'm sure everybody else there. I mean, in a selfish way, I'm able to have people on that are much smarter than I can, and I can interview them, and the audience, of course, learns from that as well. You said that the sun and the moon are about 3,000 miles up.
High.
3,000 miles
roughly.
high. Okay.
Yeah.
So where does that put us in relationship to the firmament? How high do you think that the firmament is?
That's a tough one, because even if it was, let's say the firmament was only 5,000 miles high, right? Let's just run, and then the sun and the moon were hanging somewhere in the middle. Even if that was the case, because this place would have to be, say, 25,000 miles wide, give or take, then you're talking the whole snow globe arc really doesn't apply. It'd be much more shallow, like a sports stadium, right? Or a sound stage, because you don't need to be that high. Don't forget that most of our civilization lives less than 1 mile high, right? Commercial planes tap out at about 10 miles high. Spy planes, if you believe what they say, are like 20 miles high. So even if the firmament, was 5,000 miles high, that's way more than enough to hold an entire civilization comfortably with a sun and the moon, and then put the stars somewhere up above there. So it'd work. I don't see any problem with it, but it would look more like a shallow sports stadium. The arc would be it'd be way more flattened out.
Right. And so as far as the breadth, we're also told in Job, when God asks Job the question, can you measure with a line? Can you measure the breadth of the earth? Right. So when it comes to Antarctica, we don't know how deep or how wide the Antarctica is. You're saying that it is, from what I gather, that is the ice wall that surrounds the end or the edge. And it could go on beyond there for thousands of miles potentially.
Yeah, the common misconception is that it's just this Game of Thrones ice wall. That's it, right? That the beginning of the Antarctic coastline is the edge. That's not the case. If you believe the stories, and quite a bit of them are documented, is that the U.S. government went from the coastline of Antarctica and flew their planes as best they could, and their planes evolved over time. Our aircraft got a lot better from 1928, I believe, until 1956, when the Operation Deep Freeze ended that whole thing, which was, if you're flying around there for 30 years and setting up fuel dumps and flying around with your best military pilots, and you still can't find anything for the better part of 30 years, the Antarctic continent must be, or I should say the Antarctic ring must be massive. Absolutely massive in scope.
Wow. So and that kind of envelops in my next question, which is what I'm going to do, if you don't mind. It's just a few more minutes. So you all are listening to the Breakdown Paranormal Files with Mark Sargent. We're with Aaron Barker. We're talking to Mark Sargent here on Odyssey Radio, ODYSY Radio. If you're listening on the station and you want to hear some more, there's going to be an overdrive after this, and we're going to be talking to Mark more on YouTube, over on Facebook and Twitter, etc. So you can go over there if you would like to hear more of this. If not, you can catch the rest of the show on YouTube. It will be posted up there. So Mark, we just have a few minutes left here. Before we get into too many deep questions again, where can people find your stuff, and how can they learn more about you?
Easy enough. Just go into any search engine. I don't care if you're in Google or YouTube or Facebook or whatever, and just type in Flat Earth Mark. That's it. I'm not going to try to give you any weird addresses or anything. If you type in Flat Earth Mark, you will find the rabbit holes, and eventually you will get to me.
Awesome.
Not that hard.
And I'll link what I have in the show notes as well. So we've got just about 1:30 left here. What's your purpose, man? Why are you doing this? I mean, like, do you hate yourself? Are you a glutton for punishment? I mean, what's your goal?
I don't know why I'm doing this. It just happened. If I live long enough to write an autobiography, I'm not kidding you, and I've said this many times in the past, it'll be called Unsolicited. I never even had to pick up the phone. It just happened. It was like an amusement park ride pulled up in front of my living room, and a blinking light says "Get on," and it's like, okay, sure, why not? And I got on, and it just took me, and I said yes to everything I possibly could. And you know how God works. This thing, you don't always get what you want, but you get what you need.
Yeah.
And it just took me to where, here we are 8 years later after the clothes were made, and I've gotten to do some amazing things that I never ever would have thought I never could have pulled off in my professional life or personal life. Flat Earth did that for me.
Absolutely. Well, I tell you what, man, that is one of those things that as I think about it back on my time. I would not have chosen to be a conspiracy theorist. I wouldn't have chosen to have an inquisitive mind like I do, because I've lost a lot of friends and I've pissed off a lot of people about it over the years. So, all right, folks, Mark Sargent. Mark, thank you so much for staying with us on the program today and for coming on. For those of you who are listening on Odyssey Radio, on the app, or iHeart, we are going to continue some more over on YouTube and Facebook. So if you'd like to hop on over there and you can hear the rest of this program. For everybody else that's watching, just stay with me for the next about 15 seconds, and we'll be right back with you. This is the Breakdown Paranormal Files on Odyssey Radio, and until next time, make Christ supremely valuable. All right, so a little bit of mood music there to bring us back in. All right, folks, so if do you need to take a break or anything, Mark? You good?
Nope.
Okay. So if you've been listening to us over on Odyssey Radio, we have been talking to Mark Sargent, so we're going to continue just a few minutes here as well with some other questions. Now, we were talking about the firmament and such, if I can go back to that, because my question about Antarctica is just thinking about the scope. If we're looking at this plane of existence on which we find ourselves,
Right.
if indeed that is what we are, you've got this dome that you're saying could potentially be 5,000 miles, and that's just conjecture.
I'll grab one. Hang on. Stay there.
All right, I'll stay here. So my question is going to be about the. He's coming back. Oh, look, he's back, and he's got a model for us.
This should help a little bit.
Fantastic. So you've got that. I got to get me one of those. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, that is pretty cool. They're hard to get.
Yeah, I'm sure.
The guy that made it in the documentary, he moved recently, and these are tough to find. He sent me this just so I could carry around when I did live broadcasts.
So I do have a question about that as well. On that model that's usually presented there is the flat Earth map. Dave Weiss uses that on his spectacular app on the flat Earth clock.
Right.
Is where your hand is holding that right there? Is that Australia, right there?
Oh, you mean this down that part down?
Yeah.
The one at the bottom.
Yes.
Right down there?
Yes. Is that
Yes.
Australia? Okay.
The green one is. Yes.
Okay. Now, on those maps, it seems like Australia is distorted.
Yeah, well, because you were trying to convert, you remember the flat Earth maps that we use is a globe projection that is squished into a flat Earth map, which is why we've been trying to refine it over the years. On this one, it's still a little squished, but it's not as bad. But it's got the projection that we use is the azimuthal equidistant map, and which is, oh, by the way, if you're wondering what that looks like, that is the UN flag. So if you look at the UN flag, it's got the North Pole at the center, and the continents are laid out around it. And outside of that, by the way, there is one thing missing on the UN flag. You know what it is?
What's that?
Antarctica. It's not there.
Oh, you're right. Yeah.
I thought that was very interesting. It's like, why would you leave out that an entire continent?
Yeah.
Off. It's like, well, because nobody lives there. It's like, and who cares? Like, the UN controls it.
Right.
So anyway.
Yeah. That it is fascinating because all of that stuff is, a lot of these questions come to mind because first, Why are people so antagonistic about this? You can carry on conversations now 20 years removed from 9/11, and people will actually listen to you. We're 60 years removed from the Kennedy assassination, and people have been having conversations about that for decades. Talking about the CIA or the FBI or the government or even George W. Bush or the George H.W. Bush having an involvement in that, and people are like, oh yeah, we could talk about that. You bring up the globe versus the flat Earth, and people lose their ever-loving minds.
Oh yeah, they get triggered, and that is strictly because of the conditioning, the soft conditioning that goes on throughout their life. It's not just, by the way, and now that you're delving into it, you'll see it more and more depending on how much media you watch. It's not just that the globe has been in your classroom for 12 years, right?
Yeah.
It's when you watch any television or movie since, I don't know, let's just round down to 1980, you will notice globes inserted in just about once in every series and every show that's not space related, unless it's a space show like Aliens or Star Wars or Star Trek or something like that. You will see the globe inserted places that they shouldn't be. It's like, okay, fine. The globe's in the teacher's classroom, fine. Why is it on top of a Chicago detective's desk? Why is it on this billionaire's a corner of the billionaire's office? They're everywhere, and you'll be hyper aware of them. So if you keep reinforcing the globe over and over and over again, it's a knee-jerk response. I ran into it myself when I first clicked on my very first Flat Earth video in 2014, right? When I clicked on it, it was like recommended for you over here. I clicked on one, right? I was visibly flushed, and I was alone in my living room with the drapes pulled. And I was physically embarrassed, and I caught myself, and it's like, wait a minute. I'm a tech guy. I've seen a lot of weird stuff on the internet. Nothing's embarrassed me. Why is this? And it's because we have been so conditioned over the years. It's like globe, globe, globe. No different than what George Orwell said. It's you go on to anybody in the street and say, oh yeah, how do you know the world's a globe? And they're like, what are you talking about? They won't even say, well, because of this, this, this. They'll say, what are you talking about? That's a dumb question. We all know it's a globe.
Right.
It's like, really? How do you know this? Rocket? You part of the space program? No.
Yeah.
That's why people lean on NASA so much.
Well, it is fascinating because, of course, we could have a different conversation about that as well, about just how movies are constantly indoctrinating people. I find it hilarious when you watch, like my family watches The Walking Dead, and in this dystopic period where there are no airplanes is essentially in existence, no jets, anything like that. You're out in this dystopic future. The world is falling apart. The dead are walking among them, and in the background, in the sky, there are chemtrails. I'm like, where the crap did the chemtrails come from? I know my family because they're like, just watch the show. I'm like, where did the chemtrails come from? Why are they there? They're not. So
well, there are some production mistakes, which is, by the way, you were asking earlier why we never went back to the moon, and part of it was because they were scared to death of the production mistakes being found out. Even in 1972, which predates the internet by 20 something years, they were scared. They were scared to do another Blue Marble shot. Don't forget that, and I brought this up in a couple of things. The first Lord of the Rings movie that came out, the first when they released it in the theaters. When they were leaving the Shire, there's a road off in the corner of the screen and a white car. And you got to remember that it all comes down to the weakest link. You got to have a massive production, and it went all the way to theatrical release, and nobody caught the car because everyone was watching The Hobbits. Really? So imagine trying. So when people say, oh no, the moon can be faked, or it's like yeah, it can be faked, but it'd be so impossibly hard to do. If somebody came to me. And I'd give it my best shot. If somebody came to me and said, with a dump truck full of money and said, hey, we want you to fake the moon mission now, I'd go get that money out of here. I don't want to touch it, because they'd be scared to death of somebody screwing up the production. All it takes is one person to screw it up, and that's it. You're done.
One boom mic and you're screwed.
Oh yeah, one boom mic and you're absolutely screwed.
So I going back here. I know I keep bouncing all over the place, but the firmament conversation really is, to me, I'm going to say important because all of it is, but it fascinates me because there are some people who say that if you watch the shuttles or the spaceships, rockets take off, then you can actually obviously watch how they curve.
Right.
Do you think that it's possible, because you 5,000 feet, that's, or, I'm sorry, 5,000 miles, that's like over 26 million miles, or I'm sorry, 26 million feet up in the air. The balloons that I've seen, that people have filmed the Earth with a camera, have gone up. It's like 120 or 130,000 feet. Correct me if I'm wrong, and taken some amazing footage there. But I go back to the scripture in my mind where it says that at the Tower of Babel in Genesis 11, where God comes down and says, "Here are all the people together." This is a paraphrase. Everybody's gathered together. They're building a tower. If we don't leave them alone, they're going to be able to build a tower that reaches to heaven. So God confounded their language and destroyed the tower and sent everybody on their way and separated them so they wouldn't be able to do that.
Right.
That's what I'm thinking. So there's a question in all of that there. And the question is, what brought you to the conclusion that the heights of the sun, the moon, and then the firmament?
We were just taking rough guesses, but before I address that really quick, did you ever watch my clues?
I'm sorry. I have not gotten to watch all of them. No, I have not gotten to watch all of them.
No, that's fine, because it's funny you mentioned that, because I actually specifically designed an entire clue around the Tower of Babel.
Oh, okay.
Which was, and I know it's a very, very short story, in Genesis, but it is, for me, profound, because it talks about a culture that was before ours, right? A unified culture that had one purpose. They were all one mind. They were basically too good at what they were. They might as well have been, a unified culture. And right away, they're like, oh, yeah, we know exactly where we are. You know what? We're going to build a bridge and go straight up. And we've got the engineering capabilities to do it. And you can imagine, right? I mean, it was such a quick story where God's looking down going, they're going to make it. So we can't have that. Get somebody on that. We need to mess this whole thing up. And that was it. That was the end of that culture. They were scattered. They were literally, they had there was no character arc for this culture.
Yeah.
They were like, oh no, let's go meet God. There's God's door right there. Let's go.
Right.
And that was it. I mean, it wasn't condemned as good or bad in the Bible. It was just, oh no, that was just what they were. And so God started over and did something else. But as far as the distances go, I'm just roughing it. I mean, if the sun and the moon are 50 miles wide, they've got to be at least a couple hundred miles up, at least minimum. But what we do know is that something is stopping rockets way, way earlier than that. There are some people that are even suggesting that the rockets are hitting some sort of physics barrier happening at not even 70 miles up, which is way higher than anything we do commercially or militarily, which is why when you see the rockets, you can type in Google Images trail of rockets, time-lapse trail of rockets, and they go horizontal very, very quickly, which makes sense because you'd want, it's all for show. You let the rockets go up, let them go horizontal, fire them off over the ocean, sink them in the water, but that's not what we show the public. You switch transmission to another image or computer-generated image, and then you go from there.
Fascinating. So now, considering that, do you think that we'll ever be able to get to the moon? And when I say that, I'm not talking about landing on it, walking on it. Do you think that in all of these experiments that flat earthers are doing, that we will be able to ascend to the height of or get to the moon at all and get a better picture of it, clearer picture, see the other side of it or anything like that?
On our own? No.
You don't think so? Okay.
No. In fact, the Artemis program, which people should look up because I call it Moon 2.0, and they're certainly trying because we've been beating that drum for a while. So it wasn't an accident. The 50-year anniversary of the last Apollo mission, they came up with Artemis, which is basically Moon 2.0. And they said they're going to send, they supposedly, with not a lot of fanfare, they launched it in the middle of the night. It did not a lot of press coverage. Was they sent an unmanned probe around the moon last year, right? Yeah. And then next year, not 23, but 24, I don't think it's even going to happen. They're supposedly going to do a craft that's going to do a loop around the moon, but not land. And then 26, they're supposedly, but again, I've heard this record before. We've had wonderful montages of every president since Reagan saying the same thing. It's like, we're committed to going back to the moon. Clinton and the first Bush, the second Bush, and Obama and Trump, they all say the same thing. been kicking that can down the road for 50 years. So no, I don't think we're going there because there's nothing to go to.
Well, I
And
mean,
faking it now, the longer you wait to fake it, the better the detection ability of the internet hive mind is. Now, the individual internet, dumb as a rock, but the hive mind, eventually you get a group of even 1,000 people, you combine them, they start comparing notes, which is part of the brilliance of the internet. They will figure it out. All it takes is one nerd in his underwear in Nebraska in the middle of the night to look at something. It's like, wait a minute.
Wait a second.
That belt of Orion's not. Which is, by the way, on a side note, why you will never see stars. Initially, by the way, and scientists, no one will talk to me about this, which is like none of the moon missions, there was a star in any shot whatsoever. No stars.
Right.
And the reason, that NASA says, oh, it's an exposure setting, because that was film, right? But the reason it's because it was too hard, because everything was time and date stamped. And if the belt of Orion is not in the exact spot where it should be for that time and date stamp, that's it. What the nerd says, hey, that's not where it should be. And the Big Dipper's in the wrong place too. And all of a sudden, all the academic community starts losing their mind. That's fine. But when Artemis goes around the moon last year and they come back, and this is digital technology, there's no film and no stars are ever shown in days worth of footage.
Right.
What the hell? And I've had people like, well, it's still an exposure saying, I'm going, since when? I go, 2022 cameras can do everything. Everything. I mean, it can shoot in infrared, it shoot in ultraviolet, it can shoot in predator vision, it can do everything. There should be all sorts of stars, and you're never going to see them. Nope.
So as we said previously, but one of the things that I questioned about the moon landing, or one of the reasons that I'm convinced that it didn't happen, was they talk about that technology's being lost, but it's the opposite is true. The technology, as you just mentioned, the technology is so good that if they tried to go back to the moon, then we would be able to disprove that. People smarter than I would be able to disprove that, simply because we have the technology that exists to be able to point out all of those inconsistencies in the Photoshops and the CGI and all of that. So the idea that NASA is in on this, NASA's a lie, that they're making all of this up. What's the point of that? Like, there are some things that you can just shove down the rabbit hole and not worry about, or shoved in the garbage disposal, and the government's going to be like, well, we don't talk about that. We don't think about that. All of that stuff is trash. They did it to religion. Not that Christianity is, but they've done that. They've kind of shoved that off to the side and said, that's craziness. Why create an entire organization whose entire purpose is to convince people that a globe exists, that outer space exists? Why not just say, forget about that?
Well, two different things. So creating the globe 500 years ago, roughly, and introducing it was mostly to stomp out the curiosity of people, because people love a mystery. And even, up until very, very recently, we didn't even, seriously, even our best and brightest did not have the tools to even confirm that the world was a snow globe until about 1960, because you didn't have pressurized aircraft. And until you have the internal combustion engine, you have nothing. So beforehand, it was to launch scientism. And did the devil have something to do with it? Probably. Hiding God, that's a brilliant strategy, which is, how can there be God if you're in an infinite universe, right? But as far as NASA goes, that's a whole different thing, which is they had to do it. It's not, in fact, I kind of equated to this. When I first looked at the moon missions, which I always thought were a piece of crap because I thought the production value was terrible. It's like, oh, okay, well, the Americans are just showing off. It's like, wave the flag, we're the greatest. We do anything, for rep, for image, for our brand. But when you get into flat Earth, you realize that it's not that, it's that they had to. You had to militarize space, because if you don't, you run the risk down the road of the private corporations getting involved, like they kind of are now, but they're still infiltrated. It doesn't really make any difference.
Okay.
So you remember that NASA is a collection of parts. All their stuff is from the military contractors like Boeing and Lockheed Martin and General Dynamics and big companies like that.
Right.
What you don't want is those companies teaming up with other companies to do a side mission on their own. You don't want Boeing teaming up with Frito-Lay and saying, oh yeah, we're going to do our own space thing, put a big Doritos thing on the moon. That'd be cool. Because Americans, we'd pull that off. And then all of a sudden their rockets start crashing. You don't want those questions. I mean, it's the same reason why you seal off Antarctica, by the way, is, you make sure, the Antarctic Treaty is in place because you don't want the oil and gas companies going in them there, and a plane or a helicopter goes so far off course, and then you have to tie up some loose ends. And then all of a sudden they're like, no one goes to Antarctica, seal that thing off. And they did. Everyone just kind of went for it. It was very, very quiet. By the way, the side thing on Antarctica, it didn't bug me that they sealed it off as much as it bugged me that no one was allowed to talk about it. No one protested. Like oil, Chevron and Mobil and British Petroleum, they should be running full-page ads in the London Times about how great it would be to do oil and gas down in Antarctica. They're not even allowed to discuss it. They just want it real quiet.
So it's almost as if, going back to the NASA thing, it's almost as if NASA's playing God, and all of the private sector companies that would potentially want to try to get to outer space or try to go are Babylonians trying to build the Tower of Babel, and NASA's saying, forget that, buddy. You're not. We have control over this. Jurisdiction
this is
over
ours.
Here.
This is our secret. We're keeping it. You know how power goes. All men want is more power. And that's them. NASA and the U.S. government spearheaded it so much so that they killed the space race between us and the Soviet Union back in the day. Remember, there was a space race.
Yeah.
And it was, us versus the Russians. And all of a sudden, the Americans get there, and the Russians just quit. They just rolled it up. It's like, well, that's it. I've never seen that in the history of sports. It's like the first guy crosses the finish line, and everyone else just walks off the field. When does that happen? Everyone knew it was going to happen. It was going to be the Russians put 4 people, we put 5 people. They put a small base, we put a bigger base, and then Time Magazine runs a story, as cliche as it is, saying, has the Cold War reached the moon? That's how it would have gone. But no, the Americans just go, and then they leave. 1972, they said, oh, no one cares about the moon anymore. Good night, everybody, roll credits. And then no other country even tries. The Soviets doesn't try, Japan doesn't try, the Europeans don't try, the Chinese don't try, nobody tries, including the Americans.
Do you think
and they kick that can down the road, and they keep telling people, it's like, oh no, we're going. There was this girl in Ireland I was talking to, heavy science girl, and remember, she's Irish, and she's real aggravated. Her face was getting all worked up, and I said, really? I go, when are we going back to the moon? And with just gloss in her eyes, she goes, soon. We're going soon. I go, yeah, I've heard that story. Yeah. I've heard that record. It's played out, my friend.
So these other countries as well know that their space programs know that the Earth is flat, that there is no outer space.
At the highest levels, yes.
Okay.
But when it comes to their astronauts, for the lack of a better term, I use the term loosely, astronauts, they are military officers that are ordered to do things. So most people don't know that, like, most of our astronauts are Air Force officers, colonel or higher. I think the lowest you can be is like a lieutenant colonel, if I'm not mistaken. I mean, we have full birds going up all the time, full bird colonels, even lieutenant generals. No, people don't know that. NASA, they don't portray NASA as part of the DoD, which they are. It's like, fine, they wear white uniforms, they don't carry guns, they smile for the camera, they talk to school kids. That doesn't mean that they're not military. So did the Apollo astronauts know? Yes, I think they did. I think the movie The Right Stuff, if you've never watched it from the early 80s, absolutely brilliant about the astronaut recruiting program. I thought those guys were absolutely trained to be Boy Scout heroes, and they pulled the rug out from them at the last minute, and they said, yeah, we know you've been training, you've been in front of the cameras, no one's going anywhere, you're going to have to lie, here's why. And these guys cracked. They crawled into bottles, they didn't do press conferences, they were freaking wrecks, mostly because they were getting, one thing to lie about something, it's another thing to get heaps and heaps and heaps of praise for something you didn't do. Remember, they were getting full-blown ticker tape parades. They had grade schools named after them and high schools named after them. Right? It literally worked. So everybody after that, they were just they signed the confidentiality agreement, which is different from the military, right? Which is, they treat them no different than they do spies. So spies, as you know, they're told, okay, you're gonna be in this hotel room, you're gonna shoot out this hotel window with this rifle. The guy you're shooting at is going to get out of this limousine at this date and time. That's all you get to know. You don't get to know the political intrigue around them. You don't get to know anything else. You're just shooting them, and that's it. Then you pack up, you go home. That's all the astronauts do now. It's like, you're going to fake this. You're going to fake being in a spaceship. And that's it. Now, and most people, that's enough, because unless you get the but you know how it is, denial, which is until you know for sure, until you get the debrief, you don't know.
Right.
And so that's what they do. And they live pretty, same reason like Neil deGrasse Tyson, the world's most famous scientist. People say, oh, wouldn't you tell Neil Tyson? It's like, why? Why would you want to put that on his conscience? I have him go up on stage, act natural, tell jokes, say space is amazing. Be the human Jack in the Box for science.
Yeah.
I go, I wouldn't tell him.
Mock and make fun of people and deride the competition. That way it's all natural, et cetera.
Compartmentalization.
Yeah. No, I mean, there are people that build classified, the different companies that, of course, build a little tinker, a widget. And that widget is going to be used in some classified missile that nobody knows about, or some classified aircraft. And they're building, your average Joe Jane that goes to work every day, works in a manufacturing plant, builds that one little widget. Well, there are thousands of those that are around, and those widgets come together in a lab somewhere, and they create this devastating missile or this plane. But Joe and Jane Doe, they don't know what they're building. They're building a little L bracket, a stainless steel.
They sleep soundly.
Exactly, because they have no idea. Compartmentalization is the way that there's a lot of those things that happen, a lot of conspiracies, because that's one of the big things that people ask. Well, somebody at some point's going to crack. Well, somebody that at the top, like as you think about things like, with Ollie North and the whole thing that happened with the Iran-Contra thing, he knew what was going on, but that dude never cracked.
And why would he? He was a freaking colonel.
Exactly. Like those guys that get to that point, I think that they're given that information, and then they're like, this is for my country. This is for the motherland. This is patriotism. Right. I need to keep my mouth shut because this is what continues that, that the protection or that propagation of our national identity.
Absolutely right. And when it comes to compartmentalization, think of the movie, the only guys that have to know, because people say, well, you're going to have, for somebody's going to be a whistleblower at NASA. It's like, why? 99% of NASA doesn't know anything. Why would you tell them? The only guys that need to know are the telemetry guys. And telemetry, you guys don't know what that is. That's the people that track the rocket once it goes out of visual range. They ask the telemetry, well, where is it? Oh, it's 1,000 miles that way, traveling at this speed, these coordinates, right? They have to lie. But that's such a small group of people, and you psychologically profile them. And of course, you tell them, if you say anything, we're going to throw you in a room, and we're going to lock you in a room and throw away the room. There's a wonderful movie back from the late 70s called Capricorn 1, which I love, which was about a fake Mars mission, which was partially inspired by the bad production value of the Apollo program, which was they faked a Mars mission. They pulled the astronauts out at the last minute and sent the rocket off, right? And they had the astronauts fake the Mars stuff in a Air Force base in Nevada. But what was interesting was one of the telemetry guys, a new telemetry guy that was replacing somebody who was sick, because that's always how it goes, he wrote his own program. And he was getting weird readings. It's like he's going, the transmission is completely wrong. And when he told his supervisor, they were immediately watching him. And the second he even deviated from center, that was it. He was removed from existence, meaning he was pulled. Not only it didn't happen on camera, but all of a sudden one of his friends goes to his apartment, right? Not only is he not there, another woman is living there. And if you check all the magazines, everything looked like she'd been living there for years. He was gone. So that's that. The military gets treated different from everybody else.
Right.
You psychologically profile the astronauts. And one more line I want to throw in there is, if you're an astronaut, you think you're going to whistleblow, and I'll ask you the same thing, which is, you got one shot. Who are you going to call exactly when you're going to blow that whistle?
Right.
Can you trust whoever? You're going to go to CNN? You're going to go to Fox? You're going to call Tucker up? Really? Is that what you're going to do?
Yeah.
Because you don't know who's compromised. And the second a producer who is compromised, because look, our intelligence community has people in every single media outlet,
every one of them
ever. They would track it, and they would be on you in 2 seconds. So,
especially when you're at that kind of level, that's one of the reasons why, and I've said this before, that's one of the reasons why I thought the whole QAnon conspiracy from the very beginning was garbage, because there's no way that somebody is at that high level of top security level clearance that can fart without somebody in the government knowing about it. I mean, you're in a split second. I remember on the Born Identity, I think it was either the Identity, or let's see, the second one is Supremacy, the third one's Ultimatum. Or vice versa, whichever one it was, where they brought Pam Landy into the room, and they were all like talking about trying to find the leak, trying to find the mole that was giving the information. She was like, "Have you looked at the ones whose cell phones are off?" And it's like, if you're on your cell phone as much as I am, it's going to be off very little. So they were able to narrow it down with that. But even the technology is greater then, where I'm not even, I'm convinced that there are microchips implanted in people that are recording their everything about them, their vitals and what they say to people, and recording what other people say to them. I mean, that way, even if you were to turn your cell phone off and break the battery, snap the phone in half, throw it in the ocean, and get in an unmarked car from 1960 and drive 1,000 miles away, they still know where you are.
In some cases, you're probably right. The thing that most people don't realize is that how the internet was even founded, right? It was a military backbone system that was designed so that the military could connect to each other during some sort of dystopia, some sort of apocalypse, right? And that turned into a military bulletin board system. And then all of a sudden it's like, hey, you know what? Why don't we make this go civilian? See what happens with it. And people just jumped on it. The military has absolute access to everything on the internet. And people are arguing, it's like, they're data mining Facebook and they're data mining Twitter. It's like, what are you talking about? They've got backdoors to everything at any point that they want.
Exactly.
It's just that they don't have all the personnel to watch every single person simultaneously. The machines are doing what they can to monitor stuff. I thought it was, sorry, one more thing about that, which is there was a meme out there where back in the day where, like you could bring like somebody from Nazi Germany, like one of the SS intelligence guys, and you brought him into today and show him Facebook, and he'd be like, wait, they're offering all this information voluntarily?
Yeah.
They're just giving it to you. Not only are they giving it to you, they're dying to get it online as fast as they can.
Right.
Brilliant.
Well, I mean, you think about the Patriot Act when that was ramrodded through Congress, and all of the things in the Patriot Act that libertarians and freedom fighters and liberty lovers have been screaming over for the past 20 years, and then Facebook comes along, and people are just putting all that information out there, like it doesn't, like there's no issue with it. I saw a meme one time that said, back in the 70s, 60s, I think, they were like, it was a mother talking to her child. She was like, no, I don't want to talk on the phone. The government might wiretap us. And then there's like, nowadays it's like, hey, wiretap. And there's an Alexa sitting in your house that listens to everything. It's like, we're freely given this information. The government doesn't have to worry about warrants or FISA courts or going through back channels or trying to figure out ways to circumvent the Constitution. You're telling everybody what you're giving, you're airing it.
How many people have you run into where you're casually talking about whatever topic it is, and then an advertisement shows up on your phone
all the time,
not even an hour later?
Yeah.
Right? And how many people, I've seen them do the same thing. It's like, that is kind of strange. Nobody even thinks about turning off their phone.
Right.
It's like you realize they're listening. And Alexa is even worse because that's a broadband microphone.
Exactly. And we got off into that topic because we were talking about the folks in NASA and the higher up, the higher echelon of colonels and generals in the military there that do not have the ability, or would not be talking and would not have the ability to talk and discuss any of this with anybody. So, and another quick question here. I don't want to keep you on too much longer, but
that's all right.
What would be the point in, so the United States, okay, I can see NASA. I know us. I know there are other corrupt governments also that exist around the world. We can't even get on the same page about where we're going to have the Olympics. We can't get on the same page when it comes to, where, different religions and things like that.
Right.
Why is it that this is the one thing that every country can agree to? And why, I'll ask that first. Why is this the thing that would bring all of them together in unity to not tell their people?
Well, not even, you're giving them too much credit. Meaning the new world order isn't completely the whole world. It only encompasses, it's mostly countries in Europe. It's mostly Western countries, countries of the crown and countries in Europe. I am sure most of the countries of the world, even their top government officials, don't know what the hell is going on when it comes to this. It's like, it's whatever the Americans, it's countries that have extensive spy programs probably know. The Americans, the Soviets, the UK, China, maybe Japan to a lesser degree, but most countries, why tell them? So it's compartmentalization on a global level. Meaning, why even tell like Myanmar? Why tell Thailand? Why tell Taiwan or any of the Pacific Rim countries? What does it benefit you in any way, shape, or form? So most countries wouldn't have to be on board with it because you just leave them in the dark. And if they want to ask, they can, and you decide. I mean, what are you going to seriously? It would be an exchange program, which is like, okay, you want to know the big secret? We'll tell you, but you're going to have to give us a whole bunch of stuff.
Yeah, gotcha.
So.
Awesome. Well, I tell you what, brother, I would love to have you back on because I know that you, and we don't have time to get into it now, but I know that you talk a lot about the simulation theory, which is fascinating as well. I'd love to hear more about that, and then actually the whole Truman Show concept. But I think that I hope that we've done a good enough job here tonight. Well, at least I know you have, but I hope I've asked the right questions to be able to spark the interest of people, and of course to help you as well. Just the last couple of minutes here. Is there anything that we haven't hit upon that you're like, you know what, this is the one thing, you know, that I want to convey right now about this? You know, I know you talked about the vacuum earlier, but what's that word of encouragement to people, or that one thing you think that we need to hit before we take off?
Yeah, the big thing is that take whatever I've said here, because I've thrown a lot of wild concepts out there at everybody, which is I'm not here to convince you or persuade you. I am here to put an idea into your head, like an acorn, and see if it sticks. You know, see what happens there. You, in the end, will have to figure this out for yourself. Do your own research. The reason why our community has like a 99, I'm not exaggerating, a 99% retention rate is because I don't tear down the globe. You tear it down for yourself. And after you tear it down, even if your enthusiasm wanes, you're like, oh, okay, well, I'm not going to make content, but I might or may not tell people. How would you go back? And it's very similar, if you're wondering where have you heard that before, that's straight out of Cypher in the Matrix, which is once he was out, he wanted to go back in, but he didn't know how.
Right.
So he had to cut a deal with the agents to do it. Once you tear, which is why I warn people, like, look, do your own research, ask questions, figure it out for yourself. There's lots of different avenues for you to do that. And when you do, you'll decide one way or the other, and it'll work. And if you email me in later and say that I ruined your life, it probably won't be so bad.
Yeah, and you know, and if I could throw in there as well, because this is what I started doing the other day. I downloaded a PDF. I'll try to put it in the show notes as well, but it's like 240 plus scriptures that talk about flat Earth, or that lean towards that model, an immovable Earth, fixed creation, a hard firmament, etc. And as a Christian, I would strongly encourage people as well. Start with the Word of God. The Bible is not a science textbook. It's not a psychology textbook. It's not a math or science or anything like that. But what it is, when it talks about those things, wherever it hits on science, wherever it hits on mathematics, whenever it hits on sociology, all those things, it's 100% accurate. So I would say start with that, especially if you're a Christian, and read that and understand it a little more, and then build upon that foundation. And I think that is a great place to start. And like you said, Mark, maybe somebody will email us both and say we ruined their lives. But
one more thing, I put it in your chat, which is, I know you have a big Christian audience, which is, look, go to testingtheglobe.com. It's not mine. It's my late friend Rob Skiba's. Yeah. But it is brilliant. It goes through the Bible with a fine-tooth comb, and you will see for yourself.
Absolutely. That is testingtheglobe.com. And if we search for Mark Sargent Flat Earth, it'll pull up your stuff as well. And actually, I'm going to throw up a screenshot real quick. This is Rob Skiba, the late Rob Skiba as well. He's I didn't get a chance to meet him or talk to him about anything, but I do know his work was extensive, and he has the same kind of story I think that a lot of people do, and that is my life was good, and then I came across Flat Earth, and now it sucks. But no, that's of course a joke, an exaggeration, because it will begin to open your mind to a lot of different things, especially once you see the truth there. But any last words before we take off, Mark?
No. Awesome. It was fun. Thank you very much for having me. And if anyone has any direct questions they want to throw at me, my email address and phone number and everything is in the description box of every single video I make.
Why do you put your phone number out there, man?
Why not? I've done it actually basically my entire internet life, and because trolls, here's why. Trolls are cowards, and they don't like to spoof phone numbers. Meaning, if you're going to call me, call me and set up a troll, hit me with the troll stuff, you're going to have to create a fake phone number, and trolls are just lazy, and they just won't do it. So I hardly even get troll emails. So I don't mind. I mean, my phone number's out there. Literally, there's the phone right there. You can call it. And I predicted in the clues. I said most people won't call me because it's a texting world, and they don't. But if you call and the message is kind enough, I'll probably call you back. Sure.
Awesome. Well, there you go. Mark Sargent, Flat Earth. I got a screenshot up there of your YouTube channel as well. People can go there and watch all kinds of videos, the clues that you were talking about previously as well.
And by the way, here, click on about real quick, and you'll see for yourself. There it is. There's my home address.
Holy crap, man.
I know, right? He's crazy.
Anybody ever attack your house, egg your house, do anything like that?
No, but it's mostly because they don't hate me. They hate Flat Earth. You've heard the saying, "Don't hate the player, hate the game."
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what it is. I mean, you can yell at me all you want, but I mean, you can shoot me dead. Flat Earth's going to keep on going. So they realized that pretty quick. It's like I didn't create Flat Earth, so I'm off the hook.
Well, that's awesome, brother. Much love to you. You had a lot of courage there. Really appreciate that. And stay on the line if you don't mind for a proper goodbye. Everybody else that's watching us over on YouTube, Facebook, etc., don't forget to share this video, share the show. You can also email me, breakdradio@protonmail.com. I'm not to the level where I want to give out my phone yet. I don't have the courage that Mark does, but you're welcome to send a frequency. If you go over to breakdradio.com, click on the microphone in the bottom right-hand corner, and you can leave a frequency there. That's you can leave up to 2 minutes, a minute and a half or 2 minutes, I think is what I got it set to. It's like a voicemail, but simply it's a voice recording, and you just leave that there, and we will try our best to get back to you. If you have questions, I'll send them over to Mark as well. Greatly appreciate everybody watching. This is the Breakdown Paranormal Files. You can find us on Odyssey Radio, ODYSYradio.com, also over at breakdradio.com. And if you search The Breakdown with Aaron Barker on YouTube, you'll find us over there too. So again, until next time, make Christ supremely valuable. See you, Mark.
Thanks.
Let's see. All right, we're done, brother. Thank you so much, dude. That was great. I really appreciate it.
Oh, good. Yeah, no, happy to do it.
So, all right. Well, I'll try to get you. I'd love to get you back on in the future. Like I said, talking about that that simulation theory. This the flat Earth stuff is really new to me. Let me say it's not new. I've had David Weiss's app on my phone for years, but it's one of those things I go back to and revisit and keep revisiting, and then I'm like, I got to research this now. And I had this resurgence when I went down to Florida back in December. I was just out there in the Gulf just looking out, and I'm like, oh, my gosh, that is so flat out there.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm kind of energized about it right now.
Cool. Well, anything I can do to help, just let me know.
You got it, brother. All right, man. Go ahead.
By the way, I would love – I know you're going to release this one.
This will go live Friday night at 7 p.m. Eastern time.
I'd love an audio copy of it if you ever get the chance.
Absolutely. Those will both be up. Yeah, I'll send you links to the download for the audio of it, and okay. I can also send you. I'd probably just get you a pure audio of it that way. None of the commercials or anything like that. Yeah, I'll do that. Let me make a note real quick, and I'll send you an audio of it, and then a link to the YouTube video, and you're welcome to share that or use that, man.
Okay, cool. I'd be happy to do it.
Awesome, Mark. All right.
Hello, Daisy. Hello, Mother.